Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society, and I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. We're going to talk about film and television, because every film and TV production starts the same way, with a creative vision, a budget, a shooting schedule, and a huge amount of stuff. Generators burn diesel all day and night at shooting locations. Trucks idle as they wait to move between locations. Sets are built from raw materials, only to end up in the landfill when filming ends, used once. Craft services rely on single-use items for literally everything that's placed on the table for the production team. Now, multiply that by the thousands of productions happening in North America each year, and the scale of the problem becomes clear. The average feature film emits 3,370 metric tons of carbon dioxide, which is like driving more than 700 gas-powered cars for a full year. And a single season of a TV show can match the emissions of 108 cars. And that's not even counting the supply chain, everything that comes into a set and everything that leaves. Hollywood has promised to be more sustainable many times, and our guest today has spent the last 10 years figuring out what it really takes to make these promises come to life in practice. Zena Harris is the founder and president of GreenSpark Group, a certified B Corp sustainability consultancy that she launched in 2014 with a mission to change the environmental impact of entertainment. She holds a master's degree from Harvard in sustainability and environmental management, and she came to this work not as an environmentalist, but as a systems thinker, someone who spent her early career in engineering and HR identifying where organizations were leaking efficiency and money. But when she moved to Vancouver and discovered that nobody was focused on sustainability in what had become one of North America's largest film production hubs, she saw a gap and filled it. For more than a decade, she's worked with major studios, including Disney, NBC Universal, and Amazon, helping them to embed sustainable practices in video production projects. And she's developed measurable goals to build cross-industry collaborations that make lasting change possible. She also founded the Sustainable Production Forum, which is now in its 10th year and has become the industry's premier gathering place for turning sustainability talk into coordinated action. We'll talk with Zena about what it looks like when a production plans for sustainability from the very beginning, instead of adding it on at the end of the process like we usually do with all of our waste. And she'll explain her idea of radical collaboration and why making real progress in Hollywood requires everyone. That includes unions, guilds, city governments, power companies, and those top talent stars to work together. And we'll also discuss how she uses the circular economy on set, the accountability gap that remains even as California's new climate disclosure laws start to roll out, and whether the same systems thinking approach can help business outside the film world. To find out more about Zena's work and GreenSpark Group, visit greensparkgroup.com. That's all one word, no space, no dash, greensparkgroup.com. Hollywood has the power to change how people think about sustainability, but can it also change how it works behind the scenes? Zena Harris is tackling both challenges at the same time. Let's see what she's discovered right after this brief commercial break. Welcome to the show, Zena. How you doing today?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. The sun is shining in Tacoma, Washington, and I'm happy to be talking with you.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that you live in Tacoma. I lived there for almost 50 years. It's a beautiful place, and I'm glad you've inherited it.
I really
Well,
like it.
but you started your sustainability career in Vancouver, and you had no entertainment experience. And your first project was helping the X-Files series, the reboot, divert material at 40 shooting locations, and you reduced their waste by 81%. What gave you
Mhm.
the confidence to, just call and say, "Hey, can I make you more sustainable?"
It was a little more than, there was a lead up to that. I had studied the film and TV industry in graduate school. So I did my master's thesis on it. So I had a little bit of a background. And the reason I studied it in grad school, I was in a sustainability master's program. And I wanted to figure out how to shift culture. And so the first thing I thought of was, okay, people watch TV, we all love movies, that's where I should start digging in to see what they're doing. And they weren't doing a ton. They were doing a little bit, but not too much. So I talked to all the studio reps and found out what was going on and created a whole framework like you do in graduate school and wrote it all up. And then I pitched it to every studio. I sent a white paper essentially to all the studios, and I was like, hey, let's talk about this. Flew to LA, met with people in person, and I'm like, I'm in Vancouver. I know it's a major film hub. Put me to work. And one person did. She said, hey, the X-Files is coming. It's a big show. We have room in the budget to make this great. Let's see what we can do. And that's what really got me going. And one of the first people I met in the industry was Kelsey Evans. She is the owner of Keep It Green Recycling, which is a local vendor in Vancouver. And now, I had studied the film and TV industry. I know management practices and sustainability and the science. And she knew, like, really knew the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so we worked together on that production, and we work together even today. She's a friend of mine. She's fantastic. And so we got a lot of stuff done on that show. And, that was my introduction into the film industry, like in, practical terms. Well, let's say Vancouver, because it's a major film hub, has, like, let's just say 20 shows filming at any given time, right? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot more. But I knew that the work that I was doing on that one show could scale. We needed to do it on all the shows. We needed to engage the industry. We needed to train people. And so I started Green Spark Group as a vehicle to do this in the industry more broadly. And I think that my past experience prior to even going to grad school in HR for a multinational company, I also was an executive director at an international nonprofit where we had, working groups and people from all over the world coming together to solve problems and create programs and these sorts of things. So all of that gave me confidence to step into the film industry, look around, learn from others, apply my skills, and kind of build this, I don't know, momentum locally and company locally that ended up, now we work across North America and even in other countries. So it's been a journey.
Well, you point out that they said, we've got room in the budget to make this great, but
Yeah.
that isn't always the case. So what's the pitch to a new client?
Yeah, well, those are the magic words. We can save you money.
There you go.
That is it. That's it. Yeah. I mean, look, this has been a movement over the last, let's say, 12 years. That's how long I've been working in this space. And, it's rare for folks to say, yeah, we can figure this out in the budget. Sometimes it happens, but most people want to know how they can save money. And so if you can show them very clearly that they can save money, that opens up, a whole that, like, pushes the door open. And then you can talk about lots of other things too.
So tell us about the Amazing Spider-Man 2. You saved them a lot of money. How'd you do it? And how much money
Oh,
did you save them?
I did not work on that.
Oh.
A colleague of mine, Emily O'Brien, worked on that. And that was actually, one of the first that was publicized
Mhm.
for saving a lot of money. I think they saved something like, well, I don't know the exact number. So
I
you'll
have
have
the number here. It's $400,000 or
400.
so.
Okay. So there you go. And the cool thing, like what happened with that, and then also what happened with X-Files and some others shortly thereafter, was that the studio recorded behind the scenes. They interviewed crew members to talk about what they had done. Then they published some of the stats and, like, a case study and a video. And people in our industry love watching videos, right? Um, so that, and then we did a behind the scenes for X-Files, which caught lightning in a bottle, like really created a whole movement in Vancouver. We showed that little, 5-minute behind the scenes video to everyone, and they saw their peers in that video, right? Because they were crew members speaking about what they had done. So things like that really sparked action in people and this excitement that, wow, things I have seen and kind of felt uncomfortable with, like waste. Nobody likes seeing waste. People saw solutions in those videos. People saw themselves, right? Their peers. And that inspired action, awareness, intrigue, like all the stuff that you would want to create a movement. So I can't say enough about those early videos. I mean, they really helped kind of put us on a trajectory for more awareness and more action.
A set is kind of like a microcosm of a city.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff comes together and then disperses again. And we actually did some consulting a few years ago with Hollywood about recycling the material on site. And they use the PCs for the first time and then send them to recycling. It's amazing how really wasteful it could be. Tell us about what happens on a set. What's the input and what's the output?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you are right. It is definitely akin to a city. Um, I mean, if you think about it, for a large film or TV series, there can be like 20 different departments
Hmm.
working together to make that project happen. And each of those departments brings in some kind of material, some kind of input, right? So the production office will have lots of office supplies, for example, equipment, office equipment, furniture for the office, that kind of thing. So those things are coming in, and then you
Hmm.
use them, and then they go out. And then you can think of production design and construction. These two departments work really closely together, and they're the ones creating and then building the sets in the soundstage. And so you can think about all the materials that might be associated with that. So, you know, construction is just a big input department where we're
Hmm.
bringing in lots of wood, right, and other types of material. It's not just wood, but essentially we're building a village inside a soundstage, right, to shoot. And it's all the wood and any other material that goes into that, wallpaper, any paint, all sort, props that will, set dressing that will go in to that space. So all that's coming in, and then we use it for a short period of time, and then we have to do something with it. So a lot of times, set walls are for the kind of standard, they can be reused. So these are things that if we recognize the patterns here, we're using these things all the time, we're breaking them down, and then we do something with them. A lot of times the breakdown is fast. You don't have a ton of
Yeah.
opportunity to really think. But if we know that there's a pattern associated, prep, production, and wrap, every single show, we know that we can disrupt that pattern, right? That we can plan for it. And so this is where thinking ahead and planning, like, hey, we can reuse these walls. We've got a lot of doors here. We're going to reuse these doors. We're going to send them to a place that will hold them temporarily, like a reuse center, and then those can be redistributed back into the industry. If some productions will store this stuff on their own, if they have reshoots they think they might have, or another series they might come along. Um, so so all of these are options. The default historically has been, because this is a dynamic industry, because
Mhm.
timelines are short, um, people need to get out of their stage space. The default has been to use it, break it down, put it
Yep.
in the dumpster, get that thing out of here, and move on. And so we're saying, like, there's another way to do it. And just that alone saves the production a lot of money, because those big dumpsters at the end of it all are expensive to haul
Yeah.
away. So if we can reduce even a few of those, that is a cost savings. And then that material can be diverted and reused. So everything coming in, food, big material, like, construction material that people think a lot about, um, anything coming in has an opportunity to be diverted, redistributed on the back end. And then that action saves money.
Well, and you described what's needed is radical collaboration.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you can explain what that means, because Hollywood's going through a lot of changes right now, and it sounds like sustainability may be the keystone of some new talent or new careers during the production process. So what are the hardest stakeholders in that radical collaboration to get to move from where they are today?
Yeah. I think I've been, like I said, doing this for a really long time. And one of the things that I've picked up over the years is that people in the industry have been, I think, conditioned to point fingers, right? There are
Yeah.
different stakeholders in the industry. Crew will point to the union or the studio, for example, and say, those folks need to do something so that I can, I have permission then to integrate sustainable practices. The
Hmm.
unions will point to crew or studios. The studios will point to, production or unions. And so at the end of the day, that doesn't get us anywhere. We're kind of swirling in this kind of finger pointing, and nobody really knows what to do. They're waiting for something, and so progress is slow when you do that. So in order to
Hmm.
move the needle, I think one of the things we need to do is actually work together in ways that might seem unconventional or radical. And, I keep reminding myself of the saying, like, what got us here won't take us forward. So, we have to get over ourselves and do something differently. So, we know that there's no single organization that's going to solve all the problems or change the existing system. So we need a different approach. We need a different narrative around all of this, not just kind of deferring to, another stakeholder. And so this is what I call radical collaboration because it's different, collaboration between crew and unions and studios and creatives and suppliers and industry organizations and all of these, um, in ways that have been different than we've tried before, that really haven't worked so well or not to the degree we wanted them to work. And so instead of, trying reinventing the wheel on that, we need a whole different tact. I think that in order to see success, we need positive reinforcement for people. We need to
Hmm.
actually say, yes, this worked, or, in increments too, not just like the big things. Um, and when people see themselves, see that positive reinforcement, they actually lean in, they actually have more confidence in what they're doing. And then this increases momentum. So that's kind of my view of radical collaboration and what I think is needed to kind of keep the ball rolling.
Well, you're making a really interesting point, which is that people don't dislike change. They may be a little afraid of it, but they
Mm-hmm.
want to see that the extra effort involved in making the change actually is paying off. As the orchestrator of those activities, the sustainability activities on set, how do you communicate that to them so that the Teamsters and the members of the Screen Actors Guild all say, "Oh, I'm in."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned a couple of different positions there, Teamsters and actors and these sorts of things. Like everybody is coming to the production with a different perspective, a different viewpoint, kind of a different mandate within their department. Like their job is to do this.
Mhm.
And so everybody sees sustainability in a slightly different way. And so one of the things we really strive to do, and I would say, like this is kind of a standard practice, but what we're trying to do as a team at GreenSpark Group is go beyond surface level conversations and just say, here are a few things you could do, but really try to have a deeper conversation with people in each of these departments and ask them what they see, if what they need to be successful in doing any, one of the things that they might want to do differently. Um, and really help them get there. If it's, they're afraid to talk to someone, well, we'll help them do that. We will have their back. We will go with them and, be a backstop for anything they may not know or feel confident talking about. If it is, finding a vendor and they don't have time to look around, we'll help them do that. We really have to, people say meet you where you are. But it's really going beyond surface level conversations. It's really tapping into people's wants, needs, level of confidence, and helping them grow that and helping them shine in their role, whatever it is. And I think that sort of human centric approach is really helpful and what really moves the needle, or actually builds trust, because at the end of the day, we can go in there and talk about all sorts of gear. There's a
Yeah.
lot of gear out there. There's a lot of batteries out there that are going to save emissions. But I have seen multiple times where batteries have been rented. They sit in the truck, in the gear truck, and people are afraid to use them. They haven't been, why is that? Let's talk about that. Let's really unpack it and let's find a safe space to do it. Maybe it's that light way over there and we want to just test it out. Totally cool. Let's make that happen. What's it going to take to get there?
This very meta moment, talking about telling stories to storytellers to get them to change their behavior, is a great place to take a quick commercial break, folks. We're going to be right back to continue this really interesting conversation. Welcome back to Sustainability in Your Ear. Let's get back to my conversation with Zena Harris, founder and president of the Hollywood Sustainability Consultancy, although Vancouver too, Green Spark Group. So, Zena, your mission is to change the climate of entertainment, and that has a double meaning that, clearly was deliberate. But I'm wondering, in the current environment and thinking about the stories we tell about why we do things, with all the whiplashing political winds of the last couple of years, how has that changed your message and your perception of what Hollywood's trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, I've I've said this a few times. There we have a lot of momentum. I mean, right now in 2026, there are more organizations, there are more people thinking about sustainability. There are more tools out there for people to use. There's a lot of momentum in the industry. So, for us at GreenSpark Group, we are on a mission to change the climate of entertainment, and it's incremental year over year, year over year. And so we're still working on it. It's very relevant for us today. We have had a hand in changing a lot in the entertainment industry over the last 12 years. We started programs and we created strategic plans for industry organizations and training in the C-suite, and started the industry's first conference,
Mhm.
and we're uplifting people and trying to give a platform to people to collaborate and share their ideas and all of these things that we do. But you know there's a lot of opportunity out there. There are still a lot of people who are new to sustainability and they need someone to help them make sense of it all. It's taking all this wonderful information that's been created by various organizations, and we've contributed as well, and distilling it and
Mhm.
helping them make sense of it all, make decisions that are in line with their values, and implement the things that they want to implement, save the money that they can save, that they know they can when they start doing the math.
Is the
So
money the key thing right now? Is it the sustainable savings, or is it still a commitment to the climate in the context of again all the backlash against the idea of environmentalism?
yeah, I mean, the idea of environmentalism, I think, is kind of in the broader
Hmm.
ethos. I think when you get down to talking to people one on one, they want solutions to things, waste they've seen, or
Yeah.
you know emissions they've encountered on production, or food waste, or whatever it is. I mean, they still, whether they call themselves an environmentalist or they just are a caring and concerned person, that they everybody, you know, wants a positive working experience,
Yeah.
and they don't want that tension internally between, like, I'm doing this great creative wonderful thing in my job, and then I look over here and some negative thing is happening, environmentally or whatever. So people want a holistic positive work experience, and so I think that's core at the end of the day, to tap into that, and to, like I said, kind of just go beyond surface level conversations and really help people figure that out.
Let me ask about the other side of that equation about changing the climate of entertainment. Hollywood has enormous cultural reach, but we did a little research and found that only about 10%, 13% was the number we came up with, of recent top-rated films even acknowledge the idea of climate change on screen. Do you hear creatives on the content side talking about climate? Did they ask you, did they say, this is interesting, I'd like to learn more, and I might tell a story about it someday?
Yeah, I mean, this idea of the industry reach is certainly enormous. The cultural influence of the industry, wherever you're interacting with it, whether you love a character on screen, whether you follow an actor in real life and kind of just like what they do, whether you you know follow, like, I'm an operations kind of person. I like looking at how things work and trying to improve that. But this idea of climate storytelling, a lot of people are thinking about it right now. It's a huge lever. You will hear that batted around a lot. A lot of industry
Mhm.
organizations are doing research on it and trying to get into writers' rooms and in film schools. So there's a lot of momentum in that space, and we have been engaged a few times in that effort, and it's proven beneficial. So I would say, that 13%. There's a lot of momentum around this subject, and I can see that number increasing over time. I mean, people, I think, want stories that reflect, the current reality they're feeling, in real life. And there are a lot of people working in sort of environmental jobs or in some
Mhm.
some shape or form. And I think those kinds of things, those professions will be reflected on screen a lot more in the future. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of momentum in that space.
I can see a film about a ranger saving a family from a fire.
I mean, if you can think it, they can do it.
Let's turn back to the operational question. I mean, as you pointed out, you focus on that. One of the common problems that production has, along with every other business, is trying to fully measure what's going on. And like we were talking about, the set is this midpoint in a very complex supply chain where stuff has flowed in. Now it needs to go somewhere in order to either be reused or appropriately recycled. But we can't fully measure all that. What's still in the invisible category of information in the same sense that scope three emissions are hard for a typical corporation to measure? Is there a comparable issue with production sustainability?
Oh yeah, 100%. Um, Look, there are always more things to measure.
Like what?
Well, as an industry, we have focused a lot on carbon emissions from things like utilities, fuel, air
Hmm.
travel, and accommodations. We have a really good handle on that.
Hmm.
But those are like four categories, right? And as you said earlier, materials are coming onto production, right? Food, wood, office supplies, you name it, it comes onto production. Um, so those are the things we don't have a solid handle on, right? There's embedded carbon in all of that stuff. So there are also lots of industry tools, industry carbon calculators out
Hmm.
there. Um, some measure more than others.
I
Uh,
was going to say, are any of them any good?
yeah, they're good. But some have more inputs than
Hmm.
others. Some will
Yeah.
only measure those kind of four categories that I mentioned. For years, for example, everybody in the industry wants to know the waste diversion rate, right?
Yeah.
But nobody focuses on the carbon emissions associated with that material. We just get a diversion rate and we call it good. And so so you have to choose, if you want to know all of that, you have to choose a tool that will allow you to input more of that information. And we don't have a standard tool yet in the industry that everybody uses so we can compare apples to apples. We have guidance in the
Mhm.
industry, and that's really helpful. The Sustainable Entertainment Alliance, which is an industry sort of consortium, has put out guidance on scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3.
Mhm.
Their scope 3 is the most recent guidance. And, you know, with new information, new methodology, a lot of people don't really know what to do with that, and maybe aren't sure which tool to use to be able to capture some of that stuff. So, there's a lot of uncertainty even around the guidance that's out there. So that's where, you can seek out professionals to help you understand all of that stuff.
One of the characteristics of the change we're undergoing right now is the recognition of externalities and in Hollywood production generally, and I have some friends who are in the industry. Seems to me that they focused almost entirely on who was in front of the camera and who was behind the camera, and only now we're starting to recognize that they're part of this deeper supply chain. And now California's new climate disclosure laws are going to require studios to report indirect upstream and downstream emissions
Mm-hmm.
from every vendor by this year. How's that going to change? And is the industry actually getting the traction on trying to respond to that requirement?
The studios are very aware of this, right?
Mhm.
They've been preparing for this. The suppliers upstream and downstream are not as
How
prepared.
so? How are they not prepared? What do we need to do?
Well, they haven't been tracking, tracking.
So they're the typical company.
They're a typical company. These are small companies
Mhm.
servicing, these projects, these productions, right? Um, and we've been so focused in the industry on, um, you know, pre-production and production, that sort of,
Mhm.
piece of the content creation process. So if you think of a book that has 10 chapters, we've been essentially focusing on one chapter, right? And so
Well
you've got
put.
all of the other ones and all of the service companies and suppliers and all of that is still, incorporates the book. And all of those are, contributing in some way. Now, we've been collecting data from waste haulers. We've been
Mhm.
collecting data for people who supply equipment, and even those folks are still trying to get organized with their data.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, like every other company, um, they all have their own operations. So that's one thing. You can incorporate sustainability into your own company operations, and then
Mhm.
you can provide data associated with the product or service that you were providing. And that's going to matter.
Mhm.
Those things roll up into this, production reporting, and that production reporting rolls up into the larger studio, who's going to have to, incorporate that into their corporate reporting.
So do you see this regulation as catalyzing the potential for sustainability at scale in entertainment production?
Yeah, I mean, I think it provides people a solid talking point to go out
Certainly,
and shake the
certainly have
trees.
something to worry about.
Yeah, shake the trees a little bit and say, hey, we're going to have to be doing this.
Mhm.
Look, they're not going to have all the information they need, probably in year one. So they're going to take what they do have, and they're going to estimate probably across their slate, right? And then they're going to work really hard to make that better, more accurate in the coming years. So if you're not asked in year one as a supplier for certain information, you might be in year 2 and 3. So it would be wise, I think, to kind of get your house in order and be able to start reporting on these things, even if you're never asked. it's good for you as a company because you start to understand where your waste is, where your emissions lie, and then you can start making changes accordingly. And yes, that stuff saves money. So it's good for everyone to be thinking about this, whether you're asked by a studio or not.
Well, that's the key, is that it's also rewarding to make that kind of additional positive impact, and as well as save some money and make more profit in the long run. I mean, that's what's rewarding about progress in general.
Totally, totally. It's a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
And then we just get better as an industry, and then,
Mhm.
an industry that contributes to broader society. So,
So after 10 years, how far has the industry come toward the vision that you had when you started GreenSpark Group?
oh gosh, well, there's a lot that has happened over these years. Like I said, more people are aware, more people are engaged. But I think that we are swirling within sort of the existing system, sustainability, practitioners that started working on production like I did years ago. We were kind of, we just entered this existing, content creation system.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing now is that we're swirling within the same system. We're all running up against similar challenges around the world with regard to implementing sustainable practices. So we're coming up against consistent hurdles, barriers within this system. So for me, that's an opportunity to look a little bit bigger and say, okay, well, if we keep running into the same barriers, what if the system shifted? What if the entire system shifted? What are the incentives involved in the system to keep it the way it is? And there's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
whole separate podcast. Um, but all to say, like, this is where we need to be thinking is how we shift the system, how we have that radical collaboration, how we, shift the needle on what suppliers are doing and reporting and these sorts of things. Um, and that's what's going to take us to the next level. We're going to
Okay.
get over the hump.
So, given that, and imagine that you are Zena, goddess of sustainability, and can put your finger on one thing and change it, what would it be in order to drive much more rapid transition to a more sustainable production environment?
I mean, I think it all comes down to the people in the system that are either allowing or not allowing, either making excuses or open to possibility. It all comes down to that. I mean, there are some core elements associated with people behavior change, these sorts of things. I think mindset is core, absolutely core. I think, courage even to talk about this
Mhm.
stuff in, within your small team or your department or even, in a larger conversation, pretty critical to voice some things you're noticing or what, ideas you have for doing things differently. I think that, collective confidence, once you do that, people get on board, they come together, confidence is critical as well. If you don't have it, you're not going to take the next step, right? So there are fundamental human elements that are needed to be developed, to be encouraged, to be demonstrated. And I think that is going to shift the needle.
It's a storytelling challenge in a lot of ways. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some carrot, there's some stick, there's a lot of nuance to that tale that we need to really make embedded into everybody's approach to thinking about the work. Zena, thanks so much for your time today. How can folks follow both Green Park Group and the work you've done with the Sustainable Production Forum?
Sure. You're always welcome to check out our website. It's greensparkgroup.com. We post insights in there monthly and have a lot of great information for folks. Also on social media at Greenspark Group. Pick a platform. We're probably on it. And then the Sustainable Production Forum is online as well, sustainableproductionforum.com. And from there, you can get to all of their content, videos, anything you want to know is there too. And I'll also just give a quick plug for my podcast that I co-host with my longtime friend, Mark Rabin. It's called The Tie-In. And so folks can also check out stories from crew members, from people doing amazing work behind the scenes. We talk to them while there.
Zena, thanks so much. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Sustainability in Your Ear. You've been listening to my conversation with Zena Harris, founder and president of GreenSpark Group, the certified B Corp sustainability consultancy she launched in 2014 to change the climate of entertainment. You can find Zena and her team's work at greensparkgroup.com. That's all one word, no space, no dash, greensparkgroup.com. And check out their conference, the Sustainable Production Forum, now in its 10th year at sustainableproductionforum.com. Also, all one word, no space, no dash, sustainableproductionforum.com. I think the headline from Zena's work is a pitch, not a principle. It's that we can save you money. That's how she opens a conversation with a studio, and it's why The Amazing Spider-Man 2 became an early case study based on the work of a colleague of hers at GreenSpark who helped that production save roughly $400,000 through sustainable practices. The implications of these savings are clear when you stand next to the dumpster at the end of a shoot and watch a village's worth of lumber, furniture, wallpaper, and props get hauled away to a landfill because the stage needs to be empty by Monday. The sustainability opportunity in film and TV isn't a values problem. The industry's values are already stated on the record. It's an operational capacity problem, and Zena's work is translating aspiration into line items a production accountant can track. And that's to the benefit of the environment, even if it's not visible on the bottom line. California's new climate disclosure laws are about to change the equation, too. Beginning this year, studios will have to report upstream and downstream emissions from every vendor in their production supply chain. That's the chapter of the book, as Zena put it, that the industry has never actually opened. The studios knew that this is coming, and they've been preparing for it. Their suppliers, the small companies servicing productions on short timelines, mostly haven't. That gap is the real story over the next 24 months in the entertainment sustainability business. And Zena's advice to suppliers is the same advice my recent guest, Steve Wilhite, who leads Schneider Electric's power management division, offered corporate energy buyers just a few weeks ago. That is, get your house in order now, because even if you're not asked for data today, you will be in 2 or 3 years. The companies that can report cleanly will win work, while those that can't will become a balance sheet burden to the studios. A digital nervous system is arriving now in Hollywood, and every waste hauler, every generator rental company, every lumber supplier is becoming a data-producing node in a network that didn't exist just 1 or 2 production cycles ago. California's environmental policy is forcing that network into being, and once it exists, it will not unbuild itself because people are going to see the benefits. They're going to see the savings that we've been talking about throughout this conversation. And after 12 years in the business, I think Zena's comment near the end of our conversation that sustainability practitioners in entertainment are swirling within the existing system is important to note. The hurdles they hit on one production look identical to the hurdles they hit on the next because the content creation system itself hasn't changed. That's the green living myth problem I discussed recently with author Michael Maniotis, but with a Hollywood accent. Individual actors are doing the right thing inside a structure that continues to produce the same outputs by default, and that can easily become disenchanting. On-set greening is necessary and it's real, but the industry's deepest cultural lever is the one that we discussed in passing. Only about 13% of recent top-rated films even acknowledge climate change on screen. The carbon accounting for a single TV season matters, but the cultural accounting for what a billion viewers see, what they feel is normal, and what film and television characters drive and eat and care about, that's the lever that this industry hasn't yet pulled. Production sustainability builds the operational muscle and the credibility, but climate storytelling is where that credibility will be built at scale because it will spread these ideas, changing not only Hollywood's practices, but the practices of an entire world. One without the other leaves the most influential narrative engine on the planet running on the old script, and it's time for a change. So stay tuned. We're going to keep talking with people rewriting what's possible on set and on screen. And could you take a moment to help spread the word about the sustainable future we can build together? You are the amplifier that can spread more ideas to create less waste. So please take a look at any of the more than 550 episodes of Sustainability in Your Ear in our archives. Writing a review on your favorite podcast platform will help your neighbors find us. So please tell your friends, family, and coworkers they can find Sustainability in Your Ear on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or whatever purveyor of podcast goodness they prefer. Thank you, folks, for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Sustainability in Your Ear, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.